ほう、向かってくるのか。逃げずにこのディオに近づいてくるのか。
近づかなきゃてめえをぶちのめせないんでな。
ほうほう。では十分近づくがよい。
Hello everyone, my name is Mecha and you're watching part 2 of Can You Beat Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode Without Attacking? If you did not watch part 1 first for whatever reason, or it's just been a while, here is a brief overview. The only rule of this run is I cannot confirm the attack command against a red unit. As long as they only take damage on enemy phase, all is good. But we're not afraid to defend ourselves, no matter how inhumane our methods or how high our kill count gets. While that was the only rule I set going in, I eventually realized it might be possible to not only beat the game, but also to recruit every unit and keep them alive while doing so. While it isn't essential to completing the challenge, I'm still attempting full recruitment using mostly RNG-proof strategies and minimal save states because I haven't yet learned how to love myself. And when I say I mean Hoshi the hero, my editor and the masochist who actually attempted this challenge. I'll be narrating in first person for simplicity's sake, but everything you're about to see was done by him in early 2019. The early game was a major obstacle, but everything fit together like a puzzle once I figured it out. The difficulty has been all over the place from there. Sometimes the chapter itself is difficult due to long-range weapons zoning me out or enemies spawning in faster than I can deal with them. But more often than not, the issue is with my self-imposed challenge of trying to recruit a unit or reach an item on time. I had to use the mind glitch once so far for that purpose when the chapter could have been completed in a few minutes otherwise. I'm approaching a relatively easy part of the game, but it won't stay that way for long. Despite how far I've come, I'm not any closer to saying this challenge is possible. The first victim on today's list is Pascal, and to beat him I will need to capture 3 different points. I suppose I don't actually have to kill him to finish the chapter, but he probably deserves it the most out of everyone we've killed in self-defense so far. I wasn't too worried about this map going in, so my strategy was very much improvised. The left point has axes, the middle has cavaliers, and the right has monks. So all I have to do is send a good sword or axe unit to the left, tanks to the middle, and someone who can meet the ridiculously low threshold to take 0 damage from monks to the right. I use Heath to airdrop Marcus on the monks. Hawkeye can walk on water like our Lord and Savior, Luigi, so I use him to rescue drop Raven to the left side. I also get Hector over to the left with Fiora and a dance, but I immediately undo that the next turn. I told you, it was improvised. The hulking mass Oswin makes his way up to Pascal, shrugging off ballista bolts like it's nerf or nothing. Wallace helps too, I guess. Oh right, Wallace. He's here because ballistas are annoying enough without this challenge, and I don't mind him being used for target practice. Priscilla keeps Merlinus alive, while Hector and Oswin choke the bridge. The choke point is short-lived, but Oswin doesn't give a single darn and kills everything anyway. Meanwhile, Marcus makes significant progress on the Purge Bishop, and Raven takes out the Brigand leader, capturing the first point. Priscilla and Sarah are stuck healing Merlinus still. Hector has other places to be, so Heath gets Hawkeye to take his place. Marcus starts heading back to the starting area as well. We've got a new green unit on the map now, Farina. I rescue Chain Hector the rest of the way to her and drop him off next to Merlinus. Wallace rescues Ninian, leaving Merlinus vulnerable, but now I can recruit Farina for 20,000 gold. Farina is special because she's a Pegasus Knight that can be trained really easily in this run, unlike Florina and to a lesser extent Fiora. Although Hoshi mentioned in the script that he didn't actually compare anyone's stats and planned on using her regardless because he thinks she's cute. Farina does talk to Hector on her own, but I wanted her on the right side ready to grind. Meanwhile, the boys and Heath are focused on Pascal. Raven goes up to share some spare hand axes and speed things up. Farina gets into some trouble when some Pegasus Knights ruin my plans, so I retreat, heal, dance, and send her back into the fray. This incites the monks to start making their way to the boys, but they can't make up their minds and go right back once the Pegasus sisters and Marcus return to their zone. While the boys take the forts, Marcus gets in place to set up an EXP grinder for Farina. I move Marcus out of the way and just keep Farina healed up as she makes her way up to level 16 and takes another point. The boys take out most of the enemies, and I decide to end the chapter without killing the boss or doing any more grinding. So Pascal goes on as a free man to commit more war crimes or whatever, and I go on to the next chapter. I start out this chapter by promoting both Pegasus Knights, and Heath with the Earth Seal. They've been really helpful so far, getting my units into optimal positions, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, especially looking at this next map. Pent and Louise join the party. Pent joins with amazing base stats and weapon ranks. What else is there to say? Louise isn't a god, but she might have some really important utility in this run, as she's the only unit with decent stats that can counter at 3 range. Unfortunately, she cannot counter siege tomes, but at least I'll have a better way to fight back against enemy longbows. Pent and Louise also have an automatic ace support worth mentioning, which gives them decent hit and avoid. They also give me a heaven seal, which can be used to promote either Elibe or Lyn at level 10. Yay! Oh right, and those two are force deployed here. First things first, I've got to rescue the lords from that dangerous area of the map with the flyers. Then I get Farna ready to take on some brigands with an axe reaver. I send the boys down and I just leave Pent at spawn with his wife to grind on the wyvern riders. Not long after, Farna's already completed the side objective of reaching the village for the hammer and staff. Pent wipes the wyvern riders off the face of the earth and the boys are just camping the enemy spawns. So this is the whole chapter, just hitting wait for 11 turns until the map ends. Or is it? I realized too late that I don't have any good tomes for Pent after he breaks his only one. There is a shop on this map where I can buy some good tomes, but it's in range of Vida. How am I gonna pull this one off? Well, first things first, I've got to get my boy a tome he can use in the meantime, so Heath grabs one from Merlinus, and then gets Louise to safety. I'm on turn 8 out of 11 when, using an obscure FE7 strategy called Math, I realized that Heath can survive one round of combat with Veda if Ninian buffs his defense. So the plan is to shop on the final turn, and when my time arrives...
Look at this dude.
I'm one tile short. I can do long division of the battle forecast in milliseconds, but I cannot count tiles apparently. Hellbent on my original plan working, I redo the chapter, this time putting Heath in the correct spot. While trying to simply pick up a few groceries, I get harassed by a woman saying I'm a traitor to my country, and then the chapter ends. This chapter is different depending on which units you've trained. If Dorcas, Bartra, Guy, and Raven have a higher combined experience than Sarah, Urk, Lucius, and Priscilla, you'll get a different map than the one I'm on. Sarah and Priscilla have been pretty essential so far, capable of baiting enemies while infinitely healing each other, whereas Raven's been the only relevant unit from the other group. There might be a case for using Bartra, but we'll get to that later. Chapter 24 has a similar gimmick, but the alternate map requires turning Elibe and Lyn, so for this run you can assume that the one I got is the one you get. Point is, I haven't tested the alternative chapter 27, so I don't know whether or not training Sarah and Priscilla is essential to this run. Anyway, if you couldn't tell from the last few chapters, I'm at a pretty easy part of the game. You're given so many good units that can basically solo a map, and the next one-man army joins in this chapter. This is another map with some form of precipitation. That white stuff is snow, and it means limited movement, which worked in my favor last time, but this time the enemy brought siege tomes. Pent, Louise, Hawkeye, and Legault go up, baiting some knights and a longbow archer. Oswin stays behind for the knights, but everyone else goes right. Oswin gets the speed wings from the general and hands them over to Merlinus for safekeeping, and now he's left with little else to do. The main group surrounds the wyvern riders with its strongest units, which thankfully is made simple by the limited movement. Once that is taken care of, Farna opens the door and immediately regrets it. I might be overestimating her abilities. When the snow stops, all my units dedicate themselves to choking the entrances. Pent and Hawkeye hold onto Louise, which unfortunately leads to Pent's death after an epic series of close calls. I restart, and this time I send Hector up. The point of Pent and Hawkeye choking the entrance was to prevent the thieves from getting in, but they don't have to stand there to accomplish that for another turn. The other units I send up get ready to help out on the next turn. The Siege Tome finally exhausted all of its uses, and this map becomes Choke City, with Oswin just staying behind to keep the reinforcements busy. Louise prepares to show off her main utility, baiting a group of longbow archers with a longbow of her own. Meanwhile, the other group moves carefully through enemy ranges to take the stairways. Louise cannot one-round the archers, so the other units have to back up to let her finish the job. Works out, since the reinforcements here are archers that can have their entire purpose for existing invalidated by units simply standing next to them. Speaking of purpose for existing, Legault spends his time stealing lockpicks for experience since the treasure room is a danger zone right now. How's the other group doing? Trust me, she's good. Harkon finally arrives because I met the arbitrary condition of not killing 3 promoted enemies beforehand, because otherwise a worse recruitable unit shows up, but we can ignore this dude for now. Louise still has some archers to troll, awesome style. Pent barriers Hawkeye so I can start baiting out the boss's siege tome and eventually enter the treasure room, and the other group cleans up the remaining units. But more importantly, they bait some of the archers away from Louise so she can deal with them at her own pace. Hector recruits Harkon, an absolute beast of a unit, but Louise continues to be the star of the show as she baits the siege tome and longbow archers simultaneously. Once the boss runs out of juice, Legault starts looting. Raven and Priscilla unlock their C support, Farna grinds on a hero, and everyone else starts making their way to the boss. Once that loser is dead, I finish one last thing before ending the map. This is what happens when you train a unit just because they're cute. Oh no, I didn't think I would actually make it this far. I didn't want to make it this far. This chapter is already bad enough on a normal playthrough. Fog of War, 3 green units that need to be kept alive, and a mounted boss with a siege tome. You already have to play pretty optimally to avoid getting screwed over by the RNG here, and I'm about to attempt it without attacking. Before anything else, Marcus uses the speed wings and Farina uses a talisman. Then I split my units up into 2 groups. Marcus, Hector, Farina, Ninian and Drusilla in the left gang, and Harken, Pent, Hawkeye, Sarah and Legault in the right gang. Left gang needs to protect Jafar, although he can mostly handle himself. Right gang needs to protect Nino because she will get wrecked the moment the game throws something other than the weakest enemy type at her. Those two need to survive to be recruited, but if Zephiel, the other green unit, dies, then it's a game over. You can also find a few of the best items in the game on this map. Boots, a brave lance, the rescue staff, and an item that prevents bonus damage to flyers from arrows. But some thieves will take off with them before you can say Fire Emblem 7 is the worst thing since my son, so every turn counts. There is only one thing to do. Marcus and Harken lead the charge, moving as far as possible every turn, ignoring enemies while protecting the squishies. Nino wins against the only enemy that she will hopefully ever have to fight, and Jafar heals himself up at an actual decent spot. Things are not looking too bad yet. Marcus and Farina continue using their maximum movement, but Hector stays behind to keep Maxime contained with a buff from Ninian, and Priscilla stays by his side to block the thief. It looks scary, but Maxime won't be able to attack her as long as the thief is there. Hector absolutely decimates Maxime, giving me some semblance of hope, but then Jafar heads straight down into the death zone.
Bruh.
Meanwhile, right gang gets split up with Harken and Hawkeye progressing, while Pen stays behind to handle any stragglers. In the nick of time, Farina blocks the thief from the treasure room, and Marcus gives Jafar some much needed backup. This is actually going surprisingly well. I might not even need to use the mind glitch again. Marcus continues on to Zephiel, while Hector takes over as Jafar's backup. Priscilla unlocks the treasure room and Farina rescues her, giving the thief an open path to the chests. This way, I can delay him heading over to the right side. I decide to use the treasure room as a base of sorts. From the safety of this room, Priscilla can counter all the dark mages that spawn in from above. The treasure room on the right side isn't as guaranteed though. Harken and Hawkeye rescue Nino and manage to get to the door without getting in range of Ursula's siege tome, once again blocking the thief in the nick of time. But Jafar is on the last use of his elixir, and the overall situation is getting concerning, to say the least. Best babysitter Marcus leaves Zephiel in Harken's care so he can escort Nino to Hector. From the safety of my hidey hole, I'm able to physic Jafar. I suppose that's the best I can do for now. Legault obtains the rescue staff, which has some potential here for sure. But before I can even think of a way to use it, a thief steals the fucking boots. That's it. It's mine time. Or not. A path opened up. I guess I'll have to do something about it later. Marcus and Harken rescue drop Nino in range of Hector, who then conscripts her into the armed services. That's one problem solved, but there's another big one every turn, that being Jafar's chance of death. It's not a high one, but it exists and there's nothing I can do about it. Sarah gets the Delphi shield, clearing out both chests in the right treasure room. On the left side, the thief may have the boots, but I've got the Brave Lance on lock. With a buff from Ninian, this bad boy has a lot of potential. But enough about the Brave Lance. Ursula is on the move. It's time to whip out our pro strats once again. With the enemy units now under my control, the angry mob surrounding Jafar cannot lay a finger on him. Although if they're surrounding him from all sides, I also won't be able to recruit him, which is where the rescue command comes in handy. Just like that, I have half the amount of enemies here. There is one other method I used, and though I didn't realize it at the time, it might be a bit controversial. I used the attack command. Now, when I created the original rule for myself, I decided I cannot confirm the attack command against the red units, or I cannot deal damage to a unit on player phase. This was originally meant to allow me to break down walls and trees, but I figured if a red enemy unit attacks a blue player unit on enemy phase, it was a-okay under my rule set. So, is it a tainted run? Am I justifying cheating using semantics? I don't think so, and I don't care, cause I got the motherfucking boots back. If it makes you feel any better, I never made full use of the mind glitch anyway. At the time, I didn't realize you could select enemies that were obscured by Fog of War, so there probably was a much easier solution to this chapter, and Ursula is still out here with her 8 movements and 10 attack range. At least there's an open path to Jafar now, so I can cover him in blue paint. We're on the last few turns, and all that's left to do is get Legault over to the Brave Lance chest, but he's completely blocked off by a wall of red units without weapons. I could use the rescue staff, and I do, obtaining the last item on this map. Ursula is coming in hot, but finally the chapter ends. First try. Alright, that's a lie. With all the RNG shenanigans this chapter is infamous for, I had to use save state for the sake of time and sanity. I'm just a masochist, I don't have a death wish. I made a few goofs in this chapter, like Pent dying to a mercenary from the darkness, Ninian stepping on the first mine I used, forgetting to reset for the second mine I used, or Legault getting sniped by Ursula. It was a terrible experience, and it's about to get a lot worse, after I say hell no to this guy in chapter. Status staves, siege tomes, you name it. Clog of Destiny has it all. It already sucks on a normal playthrough, but it might just be the worst chapter of this challenge. As if Battle Before Dawn wasn't bad enough, but no more complaining. I've gotten this far, I can do this. I sent Farna and Marcus to the top right because they're the best at taking out mages. Harkin can handle the middle because everyone is super effective against monks. Pent and Priscilla go left since they have a weapon triangle advantage against dark magic.
You stupid.
After cleaning out enough enemies for Marcus, Farna heads to the middle. Harkin gets put to sleep, but Pent and Priscilla keep him alive, and Sarah has a restore staff to get him back into the action. Hawkeye helps out in the middle, and Farna rescues Sarah, almost getting killed in the process. The middle is getting really overwhelmed. I need everyone but Hector and Marcus there ASAP. Everyone retreats to the bridges at spawn, but Marcus has a date with some Valkyries. I pull off a few interesting maneuvers to choke the bridge, and while I probably can't show it all, you can trust me when I say it was big-brained. Speaking of being big-brained, Marcus gets berserked, just according to Keikoku. With a definitive strategy starting to brew in my head, I give Farna the boots and dance her to keep the brigands from destroying the village, wherein I obtain the warp staff. Unfortunately, Marcus dies shortly after, so I restart from the point where Farna uses the boots. And then I die, and then I die, just according to Keikoku. I'm not seeing any other options, so I make the same moves I originally did, but instead I send Priscilla to physic Marcus. Pent and Hawkeye continue to frontline, but a Siege Tome mage says, "Screw your choke point," and transform this into ashes. It's okay, he'll recover from this. At least the RNG finally works in my favor elsewhere. Berserk Marcus forgets the importance of 1-2 range, forcing Priscilla to get way too close for comfort in order to keep him healed. Priscilla survives since she isn't targeted, and her Berserk status finally wears off. I was starting to have doubts before, but this strategy is working surprisingly well, is what I would say if Marcus didn't die again. I cannot think of another strategy, maybe kiting the enemies all around the map? There's no good solution for all the long-range tomes and staves you usually prioritize taking out on player phase. Marcus and Priscilla huddle up in a corner, quickly running out of physic uses. Then I die again and again and again. Did I mention I also died? Hoshi gets so frustrated he turns to social interactions to maintain his sanity.
You don't know what would be more fun than playing this chapter?
Anything else?
Cock and ball torture.
Thanks to the power of friendship and a few prayers to Luigi, Marcus survives to get healed by Priscilla, and the reinforcements are done spawning in. The clog has been drained and progress can be made at last. Thank you, Luigi. Farna is then put to sleep and attacked with a brave sword, but she survives. Pent finally whips out the silence staff to use against a female druid because he's sexist, I guess. He gets silenced in return, but I have a restore staff, so it's irrelevant. Seems like I can take a breather. I can even go balls to the wall with Farna. But now the Valkyries have started to move, and it's serious again. Marcus gets another taste of what it's like to be berserked, but thankfully there aren't any friends around for him to accidentally murder. So what's Hector been up to all this time? Well, he's here to recruit Veda. Unfortunately, she's not as powerful as she was the last time we saw her, but she's still damn good. The two of them kill the other Wyvern reinforcements on enemy phase, keeping the bottom of the map under control. Farna and a restore staff do the same for the top. Wyvern riders continue to spawn in, and they are not a huge threat, but all of my units in the middle of the map are starting to get overwhelmed. I reset to when Veda first arrived and before the Valkyries moved. This time the solution for most of my units is to turtle in this valley. Marcus rescues Hector and lets Veda borrow his silver lance to deal with the reinforcements. Things don't work out as planned and Farna dies multiple times, but eventually things work out when I don't put Farna in unnecessary danger. I buff Hawkeye and retreat with everyone else. Apparently, the Wyvern Riders have the same idea, flying over to the forts for healing. That doesn't stop me from getting overwhelmed though, and this leads to Pent's death, but seeing him gives me an idea. I got a warp staff in this chapter, I just need to warp in, kill the boss and seize the throne, right? Right?
Noah? I just realized something.
Yeah?
Troubadours can't attack, so it's not possible to kill them on enemy phase.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Hold on. You can kill Troubadours on enemy phase. You just need 3 mines, and there are 3 mines in the game. The first one is in the bottom village in chapter 13. I skipped it in this playthrough, but I did replay the chapter in order to make sure it was possible to obtain. Then there's the one you get from keeping at least one green unit alive in chapter 17, and the one Heath carries in his inventory in chapter 22. I used those two to perform the mind glitch in chapters 24 and 28, which was pretty essential for full recruitment, but what if I told you it wasn't? That's right, the torch staff from the secret shop in chapter 22 that I forgot about. You can use it to pull off the same glitch on the Fog of War maps, and those two chapters happen to be Fog of War maps. And it gets even better, because you can still have those 2 extra mines for whatever you want. The Berserk Staff is found in Genesis, a guided chapter that's either impossible to beat or a major resource sink, but for the low price of 1 mine you can get it from this very chapter. If you were to do a little trolling and pull off the enemy control glitch, you could trade the Valkyrie's Berserk Staff for the Iron Rune carried by Lloyd's brother. The item slot determines what he drops when he dies, not the item itself, so killing him will get you that Berserk Staff. The Iron Rune is a great item that negates enemy criticals, but it's a worthy sacrifice. But wait, there's more! Although I didn't realize it at the time, you don't even need a mine to kill the Troubadour. While it would have been ball-bustingly difficult to set up at the point I was at, you could have one of your units berserked by a Valkyrie to do the deed. In fact, I killed another unarmed enemy on this map that way without even realizing it at the time. Hindsight is 20/20, especially when you spend months of your life rewatching this footage, and basically every chapter so far could be a cakewalk with very basic changes. I'd have had a much easier time last chapter with different starting inventories, for example. And this chapter is actually easy peasy if you just hang out at spawn and let Farna and Pence do all the work. There is no reason to trigger every reinforcement zone. The Siege Tome Mages and Status Staffs can be dealt with without kiting them, and we'll talk about the Warp Staff later. With a bit of patience, you're free to get berserked and kill both unarmed enemies with no resistance. It's not 100% guaranteed to work every time like the Berserk Staff idea, but it does work. The point is, it's entirely possible to kill this Troubadour. It may have killed my run, but it hasn't stopped me from answering the question I set out to solve. Can you beat Fire Emblem 7 Hector hard mode without attacking? So far, yes, and I'm not gonna let this stop me now after I've come so far. Oh right, I forgot we're still in deep shit regardless. Stuck in the middle of a Valkyrie Wyvern sandwich, Hawkeye and Pence do their best to survive. That being said, the rest of the map is relatively simple. I just kill any stragglers and send a buffed Farna to take out Lloyd's brother. Ninian stands on the forts to bait some siege tomes, which he dodges like a pro, giving my other units some much needed space. Lloyd's brother is easy enough to take out, and I do so using a buffed Jafar wielding a brave sword. Finally, I made it past the 2 biggest obstacles of this run. It only took about every item in my inventory. At least the worst of it is over with. We're only allowed 2 units in this chapter, but it's intended to be beatable even if you neglected to train Hector at all, so it's actually a cakewalk. I bring Pent for healing, but other than that, the only strategy is to walk up slowly and down smash. I mean, Pent gets down to 4 HP at one point, but basically all the enemies are either dead or deal 0 damage, so it really just comes down to Hector killing the boss and standing on a space. And the next chapter isn't much harder. You see, while we often make fun of the low IQ of green units, they're really not that different from their red counterparts. I have to defend a chair for 11 turns, so I just deploy everyone in the throne room, unequip any weapons, and form a wall at the choke points. The enemies just end up getting stuck, so I hit wait 10 times and win. And now here is a guidance chapter that we actually want to play. Remember that time that I said that this was going to be full recruitment? I may have forgotten about someone a little too late. Some of you may even have commented on the last part that Bartre was nowhere to be seen in my party. No doubt, Bartre will be a pain in the ass to use, but if you want to recruit Carla, we need him to be a level 5 warrior prior to starting this chapter. Technically, there isn't anything stopping you from doing that. Whether you use him in place of another unit or just bring him along to a chapter with an arena to abuse, it's entirely possible to recruit Carla under this rule set. Even if she is a secret character in this skippable chapter, I have to take a second L on this one, but I can still try to prove that the challenge is possible to complete. Back to the actual chapter, all I have to do is buy supplies for the last 2 chapters, and I'm given 30,000 good boy points for mommy to do that. Basically, I just buy some elixirs and 1 to range weapons, and then wait the rest of the turns to beat the chapter. Yay. This is a chapter I've been dreading from the start, not because it's particularly difficult, but because it's annoying. The map throws weak enemies at you in droves, with the only purpose being to waste your time. And there's plenty of long-range enemies that will force me to turtle even more than I already have to. There are 3 villages that I can visit, but the only one I'm concerned with is at the top. The brigands will destroy it before you can say, I already made this joke, so every turn counts. I sent every unit I have upwards, where the biggest immediate threat is the nomads. I'd imagine the wyverns would be a threat too, but apparently they're too busy having a dance party. I can isolate the nomads easily enough, but things don't work out on account of this bishop. Heath dies a lot, and I'm not gonna bother pointing out every time that it happens. You can safely assume that if something on the map is different, he or someone else died. Speaking of dying, Marcus doesn't do that, and instead continues to be the greatest unit in the game after all this time. But still, it will take every brain cell I have to reach the village in time in order to recruit the final unit I need to complete my full recruitment side challenge. Now, I could spend an hour coming up with and executing a needlessly elaborate strategy that may or may not work, or I can use the warp staff. I said I can use the warp staff. Why the fuck isn't he using the warp staff? Hoshi, you're fucking fired. Warp staff or not, I reached the village in time by dropping Pent on top with Veda after she downs a pure water. Yeah, I checked, and pure water is in fact a beverage. Anyway, I buff Harken to handle the heroes and just block off the rest of the enemies. The Berserk staff is an issue, however, and at one point I have to use the rescue staff on Heath just to restore him. But I've reached a point of enemy spam where they can no longer spawn due to the enemy cap. I guess the game disapproves of my playstyle, but hey, this is a win. Now I can safely recruit Renault. Renault is interesting unit. His stats aren't too impressive, but at A rank staffs he can use any staff right from the start, so the boys handle enemies coming from behind while I shift my attention to the next major obstacle. There's ballisticians and siege tomes galore on the final island, and even the boss has a siege tome. I might as well call it Pent Island, because it's the only one for the job. This is the spot where Hoshi, or I, intended to use the warp staff, but it didn't make sense to do so here. Instead, it's just a whole lot of turtling. Hopefully we can at least make use of this thing in the final chapter. Spoiler alert, we don't. Once it's safe to move up, Pent and Fire now take the front lines with backup from Marcus and Louise. I buff Veda to take on the boss with a spear and then have Fire now take her place. She crits and I move on to the final chapter. This is it. Our final battle. Though I didn't manage to get to this point without attacking, I've at least proven that it's possible to do so, and while keeping every unit alive no less. With only one chapter remaining, we've come way too far to fail now, but it won't be easy. In fact, it may just be our toughest challenge yet. The goal of this chapter is to defeat Nurgle, however the door to him only opens after every other enemy is defeated. These enemies consist of max level bosses with S-rank weapons returning from the grave for vengeance. I mean, they could have just not attacked us, but okay, I'll just have to kill him a second time to teach him a lesson. Oh shit. So this first room consists of Uhai and 2 snipers with longbows, which means my options are pretty limited here. I cannot let Uhai out of this room, but almost nobody can survive all 3 archers at once. There is absolutely no safe way to box them all in at the same time either, certainly not on the first turn. Not even Athos can deal with this using only enemy phase, and besides, I want to be prepared for the second room that opens up. No one else can survive it. One turn in, I'm already getting a bad feeling about this. Conventional strategies aren't going to work here. I need to get creative. What's something that no good Fire Emblem player would ever think to do? Louise, with a 5-use longbow. That's how we win. Unfortunately, Hawkeye has to sit this one out, but first things first, I need to know if I can get past the first enemy. Louise sits in range of only the longbows. Elibe places a light rune to keep the dark forces contained. Pent uses the hammer to repair the longbow, and yes, I just said that, and stays in range to activate their support. And Nils comes around to give her one more buff. This might take a while, and I'm not sure I have time to spare. The second door opens up, and it's Athos' turn to shine. See, that's funny because I have him equipped with a light tome, get it? He stands in the way of the siege tome mage, another huge pain in the ass that's gonna invalidate my playstyle, but this is the best I can do for now. I continue to buff Louise so she can maybe kill the snipers faster than it took to make this video, while Athos starts cleaning up. Then the third door opens. Warriors. Harken is up. Go get him, Harken! Wow, that wasn't supposed to happen. This room might be a problem. I open up the same way and nothing changes turn 1. This strategy still isn't as fast as I would hope. I just know that the longer I take, the more spread out my units will be, and the more likely I am to get completely overwhelmed. If only Louise could kill the snipers faster, Nils would be able to help out with the third room. You know, I have no objections to this. So many weapons in this chapter have high crit rates, it would be ridiculous to reset every time I get a crit. Genuinely, I think Louise might have saved this challenge. With those 2 losers out of the way, Nils can buff Harken at no cost to Louise's damage output this time. Yo, let's go Harken! Marcus tanks the siege tome so that he can drop off Athos somewhere where he'll be more useful next turn. Renault takes guard duty while healing Harken from a distance, and then the fourth room opens up, containing 2 generals. This one is a job for Hector. The light rune sealing off Uhai wears off, so Lin just places a new one until we can deal with him properly. See, Lin is not useless. Harken gets buffed again, while the newly available Pent and Louise rescue drop Nils. Seriously, those longbow crits changed everything. The warriors go down, and now the 5th door opens up. It's Ursula, which is what I needed Athos down here for. He wipes her out easily enough, and meanwhile Hector does his best to keep Darren contained, and a buffed Veda starts to make progress on Uhai's health bar. Now the 6th door opens. It's my old pal Lloyd! Hopefully you've gotten weaker since last time I saw you. Otherwise, I might just fail after making it this far into the chapter. Well, at least someone is excited about this. Man, so close yet so far. It feels like I'm making a lot of progress, but in reality I'm only halfway done, and I'm still worried that this might not be possible. So, back to where I was at. I buffed Veda and sent her to deal with the brothers instead because clearly I'm overestimating Harken. I heal Hector so that he can continue doing his job, and meanwhile Athos finish up Jeremy, while Lynn, Elibe and Marcus get ready for something big. The Siege Tome Mage continues to make life difficult for me. I cannot let him out of his room or else Veda won't be able to keep up what she's doing, but Renault alone barely survives. Pent has to keep him top off, meaning Veda cannot be healed. If only I kept an elixir on Nils in case the unit I was buffing needed it. Oh wait, I guess I did, because I'm the greatest Fire Emblem player alive. Okay, I guess I should have predicted that one. At this point, I don't know why she still has the Delphi shield equipped when the archers are irrelevant to her. This time I do the same thing, but I give her the Iron Rune. And now the tables have changed, but I'm not sure how. Like last time I had 0% crit against this guy. Then I remembered that Lloyd and Linus have a support that isn't active when he steps 4 spaces away from his brother. Again, I'm not resetting for this. The killer weapon could have easily been incorporated into this strategy and eventually work. Come on, ask me if I give a frick. I don't, I just want the pain to stop. Marcus and Lynn trap Uhai to be dealt with later, and I replace Veda with Harken. Pent and Louise make their way to the Siege Tome, exhausting its final use and preparing to finally silence him for eternity on the next phase. Only instead he decides to physic Darren. This guy's dying anytime soon, huh? Strangely enough, after Harken kills Linus and Athos kills Uhai, the Sage doesn't bother healing Darren again, instead opting to attack. No complaints there. And with that, the chapter is almost complete. Hector stays in position, but everyone else prepares for the final room. And with the final enemy down, it's Nurgle time. Reinforcements spawn in from the back, but this shouldn't be a problem, because we want to finish up ASAP anyway. Nurgle himself is no joke, and neither are the mages surrounding him. A buffed Athos is our best bet. Only I'm not sure which tome to use. Half his health with the Aureola, or a 22% chance to one-shot with the Loose. With enemies coming from behind and mages being a threat to most of my units, I can only retreat for so long. And Nurgle potentially getting healed will only prolong the inevitable. I pick my favorite god and pray, and place Athos in range with the Loose equipped. Nurgle attacks first, taking out half of Athos' health. And he returns the favor with a critical hit. This is it, our second final battle. Along with the dragon, there are various other mages with either siege tomes or status staves. I'm gonna have to keep everyone out of range somehow. Athos can do 20 damage, Hector can do 17 damage, and everyone else deals a whopping 0. So I buff Athos to get his damage up to 30 and squeeze everyone through the cracks between the siege tome ranges. That way only a sleep staff can target my units. After Athos counterattacks, I simply buff him again, heal him up with an elixir, and rescue drop Nils back to safety. The dragon is now down to 60 HP, now 30. And now with one final attack, that's how you beat Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard mode without attacking. It's finally over. I didn't beat Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard mode without attacking, but I set out the answer to the question, can you beat Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard mode without attacking? And I proved that the answer to that is yes, you can. But I wouldn't recommend trying it out for yourself. What these videos don't include is the many grueling hours put into planning and failing and planning again. All in all, there is 24 hours of footage from this playthrough, which doesn't include the time I spent replaying bits off camera to get my progress back. There was no part of this process where I had fun, but maybe that's the point. If that sounds like something you're interested in, at least learn from my mistakes. One last thing to consider, that despite my best attempts, RNG plays a big role in this game and no two runs are going to be the same. Sometimes an enemy may spawn with one more defense than you can handle, or your own units might get RNG screwed. Is it possible a bad string of luck can soft lock your run? Maybe, but it seems to me like you can always make the most of what you have and find a way to succeed. If you persevere, anything is possible, or something like that. Of course, all of this was made much easier by all my amazing supporters on Patreon. You see all these names on the screen here? Those are my A-tier Patrons. They really go the extra mile to help me make Fire Emblem videos every day, or pay people like Hoshi to make actual good-looking Fire Emblem videos. And then you have all these people, who apparently have even more money to spare. My S-tier Patrons, Arkholt, Beiku, Ben Dion, Blue Caterade, Boots42, Command List, Crimson Blader, Danielle Song, D, Giant Corkscrew, Ice Lake, Curaçao, Moo, Nikhil, P. Vladias, Schmeep, Scott Mitchell, Skylar, and Zelda. Thank you all so much for making this possible, and the same goes for all my other patrons. Every bit helps. If you would like to support me too, and you can afford it, you can do so by checking out the link in the description, and even just going down there to hit the like and subscribe button in self-defense will help with that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.